You're scrolling through old photos and you stop on one from 6 years ago. 8 of you, crammed onto one couch, laughing at something you can't even remember anymore. You count on your fingers how many of those people you've actually spoken to this year. It's 2. Not because anyone fought, not because anything happened. You just stopped. And somewhere in the last few years, without a single dramatic moment to point to, you quietly became someone with no one to call on a Tuesday. You tell yourself the normal explanations. Everyone got busy. People move. Life happens. And all of that is technically true, which is exactly what makes it so hard to talk about, because there's no villain in this story. Nobody betrayed you. Nobody left on purpose. And yet here you are, successful by most measures, functioning, fine on paper, quietly aware that if something genuinely terrible happened to you tomorrow, the list of people you could call at 2 a.m. has gotten uncomfortably short. Most people assume this means they did something wrong, that they let themselves get too absorbed in work, or love, or their own head. But the truth is bigger than any of that, and stranger, and it's happening to almost everyone your age at almost exactly the same time. Welcome back to Mind to Act. Today we're breaking down the real psychology and sociology of why adult friendship has quietly collapsed for an entire generation. What specifically disappeared to cause it, and what actually rebuilds it? Because the answer is not simply try harder. Let's start with the numbers, because this isn't a feeling, it's a measured trend. In 1990, a survey found that only 3% of Americans said they had no close friends at all. By 2021, that number had risen to 12%. A 4-fold increase. In the same period, the share of people reporting they had 10 or more close friends dropped by more than half. Sociologists have started calling this the friendship recession, and here is the part that should surprise you. It is not hitting isolated or awkward people hardest. It's hitting the exact people everyone assumes are fine. The busy, the employed, the ones checking every box society told them meant success. Here's the part that changes everything. Friendship, unlike romantic relationships or family, has almost no formal infrastructure holding it up. There's no ceremony that creates a friendship, no legal document, no shared last name, no calendar reminder built into the culture that says maintain this. For most of human history, that infrastructure existed anyway, just invisibly, built into the structure of daily life itself. Sociologist Rebecca Adams, who studies adult friendship, identified 3 specific conditions that reliably produce close friendships: proximity, repeated unplanned interaction, and a setting that lets your guard down. Put simply, you become close with people by seeing them constantly, without trying to, in a context where you're not performing. Here's the simplest way to picture what's happening underneath. Think of friendship less like a feeling and more like a plant that only grows near a specific water source. School was that water source. So was your college dorm, your first shared apartment, maybe your early jobs before everyone went remote. You didn't build those friendships through effort. You built them through proximity. You were simply in the water source's radius, day after day, for years, without scheduling a single bit of it. Then, sometime after 25, almost everyone gets moved away from every water source they had, all at roughly the same time, and nobody warns them that the friendships built near it were never designed to survive the move without a completely different kind of tending. So how does this actually look in your life? Here are the signs. Sign 1. Every friendship you have left now requires a calendar invite. What used to happen by accident, running into someone at the same coffee shop, ending up at the same party, now has to be deliberately scheduled weeks in advance, coordinated across 2 or 3 overlapping calendars, and it still sometimes falls through. This isn't because you got lazier, it's because the accidental version of friendship depended entirely on the proximity you no longer have. Sign 2. You have people you'd call friends who you haven't actually seen in over a year. The relationship exists almost entirely in your phone, now, likes, occasional texts, a birthday message. It feels like maintenance, and it technically is, but it's the equivalent of watering a plant through the screen of a photo of it. The connection isn't gone, but it's been frozen at whatever depth it had the last time you were actually, physically, repeatedly around each other. Sign 3. Making a new friend as an adult feels almost impossibly slow compared to how it used to happen. In school, closeness could form in a semester. Now it can take years, because you're trying to manufacture, through occasional deliberate effort, the exact conditions that used to happen automatically hundreds of times a week. You're not worse at making friends, you're doing by hand what used to be done for you by your environment. Sign 4. You've started confusing your closest coworkers for close friends, because they're the only people you see with any real regularity anymore. And there's real affection there, genuinely. But notice what happens the moment one of you changes jobs. Most of those relationships quietly evaporate within a year, which tells you something honest. It wasn't built on choosing each other. It was built on the same forced proximity that used to build all your friendships, and proximity alone was never actually the whole story. Sign 5. You feel a strange guilt every time you decline plans, because you know, somewhere in the back of your mind, that this might be the one invitation that keeps a fading friendship alive. Every declined invitation now carries more weight than it used to, because there are fewer total invitations left in the system to absorb the loss of any single one. Sign 6. You've started describing your ideal weekend as doing nothing, and some part of you suspects that's not entirely true. Rest is real and it's necessary. But for a lot of people, doing nothing has quietly become the path of least resistance, specifically because reaching out requires initiating the entire structure that used to build itself, and initiating is exhausting in a way that simply showing up somewhere used to never require. Now here's the part that matters most. The part almost nobody says out loud. None of this happened because you're worse at friendship than people used to be. It happened because the entire delivery system for adult friendship, the schools, the dorms, the walkable neighborhoods, the third places where people used to simply exist near each other without an agenda, quietly disappeared or thinned out for almost your entire generation at almost the same time, and nothing came along to replace it. You're not failing at something everyone else is succeeding at. You're facing a structural problem that everyone your age is facing, mostly alone, mostly in silence, mostly assuming it's a personal failure instead of a shared condition. So, what does this actually cost you if it goes unaddressed? It costs your health, measurably. Researchers, including former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, have documented that chronic loneliness carries mortality risk comparable to smoking a significant number of cigarettes a day. It costs you resilience, because the research on hardship consistently shows that people with strong social support recover from setbacks faster than people who face them alone, and the friendship recession is quietly stripping that buffer from an entire generation before they even know they'll need it. And it costs you something harder to measure but just as real, the specific, irreplaceable feeling of being known over time by people who chose to keep knowing you, which is very different from being known by people who simply happen to still be nearby. So how do you actually rebuild something that used to happen automatically? 3 principles. Principle 1. Manufacture proximity on purpose, because your environment isn't going to do it for you anymore. This means the unglamorous, slightly awkward work of showing up to the same thing repeatedly, the same class, the same run club, the same recurring event, on a schedule, even when you don't feel like it, because repetition is the actual mechanism that used to happen for free and now has to happen by design. Principle 2. Lower the threshold for what counts as an invitation. Adults wait for the perfect occasion to reach out, and the perfect occasion rarely arrives, so the invitation never gets sent. The people who successfully rebuild adult friendships tend to send the boring, low-stakes invitation constantly. Coffee, a walk, 15 minutes. Instead of waiting for the big planned event that requires everyone's calendar to align. Principle 3. Accept that adult friendship now requires deliberate maintenance the way your childhood friendships never did, and stop treating that as a sign something is wrong with the relationship. A friendship that needs scheduling isn't a lesser friendship. It's simply an adult friendship, operating in an environment that no longer does the scheduling for you, and the sooner you stop measuring it against the effortless version you had at 19, the sooner you can actually start building the version that's possible now. There's a concept sociologist Ray Oldenburg wrote about called the third place, somewhere that isn't home and isn't work, where you can simply exist around other people without an agenda. He argued that a healthy society needs these spaces the way a body needs water, and that when they disappear, people don't just lose a location. They lose the quiet, repeated, unplanned contact that friendship was always actually built from. Most people your age aren't missing a personality trait. They're missing a place. And the good news buried inside that fact is that places can be rebuilt, deliberately, on purpose, even if the ones you had are gone for good. So tell me, out of the 6 signs we covered today, which one described your life the most accurately right now? Tell me in the comments. And know this, if your friend group has quietly shrunk over the last several years, and you've spent that whole time secretly wondering what you did wrong, you probably didn't do anything wrong at all. You lost a structure, not a skill. If this video finally explains something you've felt but never had words for, hit like and share it with someone you miss but haven't spoken to in longer than either of you would admit out loud. It might be exactly the low-stakes invitation this video just told you to send. Subscribe to Mind to Act so we can keep decoding the hidden corners of the mind together. Goodbye, and see you next time.